Ike Vanden Eykel joins us today with Koons Fuller. It is so good to see you.
Good to see you, Daniel.
I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to be with us and join us.
My pleasure.
It's a beautiful office. Everyone can see it here that's watching on the video. If you're if you're listening, it is a beautiful office. And this is a first time for the show to record an in-person interview in an office. And so if it sounds a little different, it might be because of that. But we're grateful that you're here and excited to jump in and have some of these young lawyers learn something from you today.
Pleasure to do what I can to educate people.
Absolutely. Well, first off, and I already have given a little bit of an introduction to you for the folks listening, but from just hearing from you, describe just your practice, your firm, and kind of what you all do here at Koons
Okay. We are a firm devoted solely to family law, matrimonial practice.
Yeah.
We're the second largest such firm in the country. We have offices in Dallas, Southlake, Denton, Plano, and Houston.
Yeah.
We have 37 lawyers, I think, at the last count. I started with this firm in a merger January 1 of 1990. I have been running it as the CEO since 92. And we like to think that we are either at or going for the cutting edge in family law.
Yeah. Well, and I think the accolades, awards, and other recognition items that we have in the state and around the country bear that out, both for you personally as well as for the firm more generally.
Well, we always like to be recognized. It shouldn't go to your head, and it best not, because there'll be somebody rolling over you from behind. But
right.
We try hard to stay on the front of the curve.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what is happening in the family law practice area of late? What are a couple of things maybe that I know you do CLEs, you do a lot of talks, and you're on that cutting edge. What are some of the things that are going on in the family law practice these days?
Well, as in all areas of practice, and quite frankly, in all areas of business, technology is always on the forefront, or it darn well should be,
right.
And your practice and your planning for your practice.
Yeah.
And a practice our size, technology and staying ahead of technology is always at the epicenter of what we do. We go through a lot of legislative changes that dictates where we're headed, where we're going. Texas is unique in that we have the ability to try our matters, both property as well as custody, to juries. So when things change in our field, they may not be changing in other states where we practice from time to time. But in Texas, the jury as well as the legislative changes keep things kind of in a constant flow of change.
Yeah, yeah. And that's, I know something that our listeners are, if they're listening to this, it's because they want to learn, grow, become the best lawyer they can be. And one of those pieces is to stay on top of what are those changes.
Well, and the challenges change from time to time, because what we're doing today in technology, a lot of it you didn't even know what it was 5 years ago,
right? Which
makes a person who is planning appropriately, you need to be worried about what's coming 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And the big tsunami out there is artificial intelligence. And we don't know when it's going to hit. We don't know, quite frankly, how big it's going to be.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be small.
Yeah.
So there's huge changes to law in general, and it's not going to miss family law as a specialty.
Right. Well, that's interesting you bring up artificial intelligence. It's a question that I get from time to time, and I'd be curious to your thoughts. You've obviously given some thought to it and seen some of it in its early stages. What for young lawyers who are looking at this and kind of, you can read doomsday scenarios for lawyers when it comes to AI, that it's going to take over much, if not all, of the practice or whatever. How do you kind of view AI in terms of how a young lawyer could start to really utilize it as a tool rather than look at it as some type of threat that's a replacement threat?
Well, the first thing one needs to know about artificial intelligence, other than A, it's coming,
Right.
and B, it's going to have a massive input and effect on our practice.
Yeah.
So the number one watchword I would give to a young lawyer is, if you don't understand artificial intelligence, I would suggest that you become knowledgeable about it.
Yeah.
How is it going to apply to your specific specialty and law in general?
Right.
And rather than being afraid of it, for lack of a better word, own it.
Yeah.
Go after it.
Yeah.
Be someone who is anticipating
Yeah.
the arrival of this tsunami,
Yep.
as opposed to being surprised or scared of it, because there's not a question of whether it's coming.
Right.
So be ready or be surprised.
Yeah. Well, one last question I want to ask you about family law specifically before we leave that for a moment. I know there are young lawyers out there who are, still trying to figure out maybe what specific area of practice to focus on. You might be doing litigation more generally, but still trying to figure out what area niche to go into. One of the things I admire and appreciate about you is the joy with which I observe in you, just in your practice and in the way that you carry out things here. So you have the floor to make a pitch for family law to young lawyers as an area to go into.
All right. The bottom line, Daniel, what you have to understand about family law is it is a subspecialty of civil litigation.
Right.
If you don't want to do litigation, courtroom, then with one exception, family law is not a good target market for you. The exception is that, as in all other fields, we have a very active appellate scenery in family law.
Yeah.
Our firm specifically, because of our size, has its own family law capability within the firm.
Yeah.
That will be less of an option with the smaller size firm, but appellate practice is very, very big in family law.
Yeah.
Just because of the sheer volume of cases. So
Right.
First off, you got to want to do trial work to do family law. The advantage of advantages, I should say, of doing family law, number one, you're going to have extremely enhanced client contact, as
Right.
opposed to in civil litigation, because our practice is centered around client contact, and it's going to happen, and it happens frequently. The second thing is, you really do need to embrace the aspect of courtroom into what you want to do with your law practice. If you're someone who is afraid of the courtroom, there's a lot better places to practice than in the field of family law. But family law is potentially, depending on the type of case that you get in your niche, is going to have a diversity of property issues that, quite frankly, you see in civil trial law, which is where I started, and I'm board certified in.
Yeah.
So I know of what I speak.
Right.
So it's there if you want it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to ask you now to reflect a little bit to your early days in practice. Is there something that you learned, maybe just on your own or from a mentor or something, as a young lawyer that has stuck with you all these years, that's a key part of who you are as a lawyer today?
Well, people ask a lot as you get to be an older lawyer, and if you've had some modicum of success, people ask you all the time, how did you do what you did?
Yeah.
Well, number one, and this may sound trite,
No.
but you got to be ready to work hard.
Yeah.
And in order to successfully work hard, you got to work smart. And everybody has 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week. And as simplistic as that sounds, it is that simple. And you got to get your job done, and you got to figure out how you're going to get it done. The biggest advantage that I have had, in my opinion, over many of my contemporaries is that very early on in my practice, I recognized and embraced that 24 hours of my time, 7 days a week, was not enough to get me where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Which means you either A, give up, or B, figure a way out of that.
Right.
So the quite frankly, the word for the day is you got to learn to delegate. And that means you got to have people helping you.
Yeah.
And in my case, one of the keys to my success has been acquiring and developing a quality team around me to where I can delegate. And essentially, you're cloning yourself.
Yeah.
So you don't have 24 hours a day
Right.
and 7 days a week. You've got multiples of that.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready or willing to do that, then you're going to run out of time and you're going to run out of days.
Right.
And as simple as that sounds,
Yeah.
that's a key.
So if someone listening to this is in their third year of practice, still trying to maybe figure it all out, maybe they have a paralegal that helps them or somebody, but other than that, they're probably on their own. They have a partner giving them work. That's great. They're learning it. So how does that person start to think about and apply that delegation or maximizing of time? Or can they when they're at that stage?
Well, they can, but if you do it in a vacuum, you're going to have a lot of fun doing it, but it's not going to have that much effect. As a young lawyer, you have to have some idea where you're going, and you better at least develop. It's not something you phone in, but
Right.
you've got to develop a plan. How am I going to get from where I am today
Yeah.
to where I want to be? Who are your mentors? Who do you aspire to be in the practice?
Yeah.
And when you sit down and talk to people later in their careers, you're often very surprised and taken back by who their mentors were. Why you don't, this practice isn't like waiting for Amazon to deliver your package at your front door.
Right.
Like, wow, look, my practice has gotten great.
Right.
No, it doesn't happen by accident. You have to have a plan.
Right.
And there's ways to develop those plans, there's ways to implement those plans, but they don't just happen.
Yeah.
And you don't sit by the phone waiting for someone to call and say, hey, you're a success.
Right. Right. Do you have a mentor of yours story that you want to tell or that you want to brag on?
Actually, I never worked for my mentor. My mentor is now deceased,
Yeah.
but there was a lawyer in town who I thought had it all together, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was a smart, intelligent, not necessarily the same things,
Right.
but implemented and built a practice and had the connections and had the courtroom skills that I always aspired to have. And so I always called him my mentor, and people would ask me all the time, did you work for him? I said, no, he offered me a job once, but I didn't take it. But he was always my mentor. And what having a mentor does, and most often it's someone you work with,
Yeah.
but it gives you something to aspire to. It puts you through the project of looking at
Yeah.
what do I want to develop? What is my plan and how am I going to do it?
Yeah.
And having someone as an example, it's very helpful.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because as I've been, and one of the things I did at the law school before I left was we were putting together mentoring teams and really trying to help develop mentorships with law students. And one of the things we discovered in research is that students and young lawyers really were going towards more of a model of having multiple mentors in their life as opposed to kind of one mentor the way maybe it used to be. And so this idea of having a mentor maybe in your office that you work for, but then also one maybe across town in another office, and then someone else maybe who's even in a different industry, but just because they have a business acumen or something else. There's just different ways to put together mentor teams around you that can give you these tools that...
Exactly.
Right?
And quite frankly, there's aspects of your life speaking to lawyers now, that you may need a mentor in something that is not necessarily law related.
Absolutely.
It may be life related,
Yeah.
because you kind of have to balance, going back to that reality. You've got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
And how you prioritize your goals and make all this work, it kind of takes a team effort to a great degree.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Over the years, you've supervised and hired a number of associates and young lawyers. What's maybe one or two things that a young lawyer can do to impress you when they're walking these halls? They've been here a year or two. What are the things that stand out among the associates that you say, oh, she's going somewhere, I like him? What are some things that young lawyers do to make impression on you from a positive standpoint?
Well, the first thing, and this is it's informative, but it's a little bit difficult for people to understand. One of the things that's the most important in success is developing presence.
Yeah.
And we oftentimes, half kidding, half serious, talk about you can't trade for it, you can't buy it, you can develop it and polish it, but you've got to learn to develop your aspect of, and your degree of, and your brand of presence. But there's also, when it gets, that's a little bit more esoteric, but it's real. But beyond that, what I look for over a period of time is dependability, number one. People need, if you hearken back to what I said earlier, in order to succeed in my game plan, I had to learn how to clone myself, and i.e., I had to be able to delegate.
Yeah.
Now, when you delegate, you have to successfully delegate, which means you have to have people taking responsibility for and delivering you work product. They need to own it, and you need to let them own it. If you just play at delegating, your results they'll show it.
Right.
So I got to have people under me that are long-term players on my team that are dependable.
Yeah.
They have to get the job done.
Yeah.
Now, a subscript to that is you got to, in order to succeed in any practice, my opinion, and family law practice is no different, you'd best have a detail orientation, because you are handling people's lives, whether it be custody or property or both. And if you let something slip through the cracks, and some people are strategists, I would fall into that category. I am more of a strategist than I am a follow through on the detail person, because I couldn't do both where I was headed.
Yeah.
So I chose the strategy part, and which means I surround myself with people who are dependable and have a very high degree of being detail oriented.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds basic, and quite frankly, it is.
Well, sometimes just keeping it simple
That's right.
is the right way to do it. On the flip side of that, I'm sure you've run into situations where someone's been here for a little while and you just can identify they're not going to be a long-term fit for whatever reason. What's something that associates can do that kind of put that seed of doubt in your mind that they're not maybe cut out for this, or maybe this isn't the right fit? What are things that you're kind of looking for that yellow flag
Well,
being raised?
it's a good question, because it does happen, and it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
Number one, you need, and this is difficult for everyone, and I will put myself in this category, you need to be ready to take constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is almost like having building blocks. You're going to be able to do something with it if you accept it and do something.
Yeah.
If you can't take constructive criticism, you got a problem, because we all make mistakes. We all fall short.
Right.
And I expect people under me to have the chutzpah to come to me and say, I think you screwed that up.
Yeah.
They probably are going to say it a little bit better than that, but I'm not perfect.
Right.
And I'm running hard, and I'm relying on a lot of people. And if I'm doing something wrong, I got to have somebody that's willing to stand up to me, stop me in my tracks, and say, with all due respect, which means you're about to not be respected,
Right.
There's a better way to do this.
Yeah.
And my thought always is, let me know. What is it? How would you do it differently? And if their idea is better than mine, guess what? That becomes the new plan.
Yeah.
So when someone will not accept constructive criticism, then you don't just drop them, but you got to let them know that's not a very good trait.
Right.
People don't teach you in college or law school, the 10 top things to failing.
Right.
But you're going to learn. Some people are better at communicating these than others,
Right.
but you got to be ready to listen. And quite frankly, when you got people under you, they're entitled to know what your expectations are.
Yeah.
And I hope this is right for a lot of people. If you have people working for you, sometimes you have to sit back and say, have I accurately and honestly given them the tools and the kind of the roadmap of what I expect?
Yeah.
And sometimes that constructive criticism, if you're being introspective, you might say, hey, maybe I should have done a little better job of this.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we try to look at our own mistakes as well.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, because I know I've had conversations with a number of lawyers, partners and leaders of firms who are constantly trying to figure out, did I communicate enough with that lawyer? Did I give them enough, either notice or constructive criticism to let them know that they weren't meeting my idea of what they needed to be? And so I think for young lawyers, they need to know, like, that's a dialogue that a lot of senior lawyers are having in their heads, and it's not always clear. And so making sure that on the same page.
Well, and everybody's not the great communicator.
No, that's right.
It doesn't always happen naturally.
No, and it works both ways. You're right. When you're going through the process of hiring lawyers, are there specific things that you're on the lookout for? Let's start with just on paper and on resumes, cover letters, the documents before you get to the interview.
Yeah, it's a two-step process. The first step is, quite frankly, not as important as the in-person, but you're obviously a person in my position is obviously looking for basic credentials.
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school? Where are you in your class? In my particular field, I always have an eye out for what financial background do these people have, whether it's a finance background or accounting background.
Just an eye for numbers or mind for numbers.
Because one thing that law school, in my opinion, falls short on is honing any kind of financial skills.
Right.
And when somebody asks you if you can read a financial statement, and they ask you what is that book, you have a little bit of a gasp. And we're going to get back to basics here. Debits and credits mean something.
Right.
And if somebody's not able to discern that, then you can take steps in getting them to take some classes, or you can bring in some CLE on accounting. And again, not every prospective employer does that.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for it.
Yeah.
And it's not always there. Quite frankly, it is a vast minority of the cases, but it's going to get my attention.
Yeah. Well, and that's good to know too, because if someone, and I imagine that within the family law realm, it's not specific to you, this firm specifically. Most family law firms probably would have that same interest. And so for people that might not think of, my numbers background, my business degree, or my work maybe outside of law school before I went to law school could be beneficial just because I know how to read a financial statement. Just knowing that you need to highlight that or even include that maybe on a resume could be a missed opportunity if they don't communicate it to you.
And quite frankly, if if an individual has the wherewithal to find someone who can give them input on the development of their resume, it's what's selling you through this extremely tough process.
Yeah.
Because there's not 2 or 3 people looking for every job. There's multiples of that.
Yeah,
and
right.
so you need to be able to distinguish yourself.
That's right.
And there's no one way to do it, or they'd all look identical.
Right.
So
that's right.
Getting some input on enhancing your own strengths and highlighting them makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. You mentioned 2-step process. So when you get to the interview stage, what's something that you're on the lookout for there?
Well, again, sounds trite, but I'm looking for presence, and I'm looking for some indication of people skills.
Yeah.
I laughingly tell young law students at orientations that having something other than fine as a response is really helpful.
Right.
You've driven all this way, you've gotten through, and you've gotten into my office. Right. How are you doing? Fine.
Yeah. The teenage answer to a mom.
Yeah.
That's fine, Mom.
All good.
All good.
Good. Number 2, and this is more of a problem for young men than it is women, but I tell men that you need to not look like this is the first time you've ever been in a suit. Because looking that uncomfortable dressed up, which is, by the way, what you're going to be in the courtroom, and oftentimes, hopefully, in front of clients, you want to get comfortable in that. Now, you don't have to have your feet up on the chair, but you need to look comfortable. And some amount of people skills, but don't have your canned questions that are on the internet that if someone is reading up on them, we know that's what you're doing is you're preparing for the interview. You got to be yourself, but make yourself somewhat more interesting than a wallflower.
Right.
So how do you do that? Oh, a number of ways.
We'll talk about you asking questions. That's a good one. So, because we talk about that a lot here about preparing ahead of time and the opportunity that you often have, hopefully have in an interview when the interviewer says, do you have any questions for us or do you have any questions for me? You mentioned the canned interview thing, but
so you might want to have one or two,
right?
And
so that's important.
They won't. All questions won't fit into how you've had the interview, so you might want to have a little bit of a cadre of them.
Yeah.
But being able to communicate sounds simple, but it's extremely important because these are people in an interview process that you're hopefully going to be working for. You would kind of like to get a knowledge of what they're like, and I can assure you they want to know what the applicant is like.
Yeah.
And they want to get a feel for them. Do I like them? Do I not like them? And being yourself is important, but if yourself is boring, do something to liven that up.
Right.
And, everybody is different, so everybody's needs are different, but being a total bore doesn't really help. You got something to sell, learn how to sell it.
Yeah, no, that's good. What would you say has been your approach over these maybe last 5 to 10 years in kind of working through this? It's not just in the legal profession, I would say in general as well. Young people in the workplace kind of trying to find that work-life balance, or whether it's in flexible work arrangements or it's ping pong tables in the playroom in the office or whatever. But what have you seen here for your firm and in your lawyers, and how have you adapted to just that cultural shift that we're seeing?
Well,
or are you seeing it?
There is a big difference in the legal playing field for associates and partners and lawyers in general. Different one today than there was 20 years ago, and it is ever evolving, and the employers have to evolve with it if they're going to be successful.
Yeah.
We have a saying here: you either stay aggressive and grow, or you stagnate and die.
Right.
Stagnation is never, I've never seen it put in a positive context like, hey, you're stagnant. That's great.
Right. Way to go.
So you got to change with the life. But young lawyers, when they're coming out of law school, with no exceptions, are learning how to be a lawyer.
Sure.
And let's go back to that standard. There's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. And you're going to, in many instances, want to have a family. And you're going to have a spouse. You may very well have children. You're going to have outside interests, and you're going to want to be a successful lawyer. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to be a successful lawyer, in all likelihood, you will not.
Right.
And but you can't necessarily be everything to everybody all the time, and that's where young lawyers, male and female, run into some brick walls if they're not careful, because not everybody has the same elements in their life, but they all have the same 24 hours. And delegation to other people works pretty well in the law practice.
Yeah.
It isn't worth much in your personal life.
Right.
And so you've got, the successful people have a balance, because success has several parts to it. Because if your home life is a shambles or a total failure or disaster, and you're great at work, maybe when you sat down your life plan, maybe that's what you expected.
Yeah.
In which case, hey, pin the medal on
you've
them.
Done it.
You've done it. But the vast majority of people want some element of success in law practice. They want some element of success in their life. And the last time I checked, very few young people graduating from law school have all those answers.
Yeah.
So if you don't have them, don't panic. But don't sit in the house and look on Amazon trying to find books to teach you how to do all this. Right. You've got to have your mentors. You got to have people you can talk to. You have to listen to people. Mm-hmm. Talking successfully with other people means listening and learning from it. Yeah. And learn from people's mistakes, learn from your own mistakes. It is not easy to balance professional with home.
Yeah.
And if you have a family, if you're married, it's going to take a team effort.
Yeah.
Now, both of those team players may have the same problems. So the communication is the real key there.
Right.
It's not easy.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
No, that's well put and good advice. Well, we are nearing the end of our time. Is there? And before we get to our rapid fire questions to end, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to share with the folks listening before we?
Well, the one thing I've told a great number of young lawyers as they're coming up is that you got to have a target to aim at.
Yeah.
And there is absolutely nothing wrong with taking whatever you're firing, whether it's an arrow or a gun or anything. And if you want to shoot right at the middle of the target, nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah.
Where it becomes a problem is if after 5 or 6 or 8 years, you come to your employer and say, I'm not being paid like those guys at the top. Because I do have certain things I can guarantee our listeners. If you shoot at the middle, that's the best you're going to get.
Yeah.
Now, if you shoot at the top, you may or you may not make it.
Right.
But at least you know where your target is. So decide this, it all circles around the same thing. 24/7, it's all you got. Life, work balance. That's important. You want me to tell you what's important, how you should do it? I'm not going to tell you that because everybody has different elements in their personal life, in their professional life, where they want to get to, how organized are you, how successful are you going to be able to get there, both in personal and professional. It does take help, but if someone is willing to just tell you exactly how it is, that you're going to make it, you'd best run because they don't know enough yet.
Right.
But know where your target is, and don't find out after 20 years, what do you mean target? What?
Yeah.
What? Where do you want to get to?
Right.
And it does help to have somebody confront you about what do you want?
Yeah.
Where's your goal?
Yeah.
And if you're not being asked that, then you need to do it yourself.
I think that is, hopefully those listening, the number one takeaway from this. If you haven't done it, you don't have some type of plan in place.
If you don't have a plan, you
get
best
something
get one.
in place.
You best get one, because you know what? Life is filled with curveballs.
Yeah.
And the Houston Astros are not the only ones who have stealing signals. There's people going to be clawing to get past you. They're going to step on your head. If you don't have a plan, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah. No, that's good. So hopefully everyone will, within days of this podcast, have a plan in place.
It's not easy, but it is essential.
And a worthy commitment of their time to do that.
Yeah, it's essential.
Yeah.
Essential.
Ike, thank you so much for taking time
to
be with us. Let's end with these rapid fire questions. Okay. Name the one trait or characteristic you most want to see in an associate.
Dependability.
Dependability. What habit has been key to your success?
Hard work.
There you go. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
I'm going to betray my age because what has been successful in my practice, in my life, is literally embracing everything that's computerized in the form of email and calendaring, and living by it. And when I tell people I live by email, if it's not in an email or a text, you're not getting through to me.
Yeah.
I don't have phone messages. I'm never 5 messages behind.
Yeah.
I'm in touch with people. And so my app literally is my computerized calendar and my email.
Yeah.
And email means text as well.
Yeah. That's how we set up this podcast.
That's right.
We didn't talk about phone
No,
before
we
this.
didn't. You don't do that.
No. And of course, most important, your favorite legal movie.
No question about it. Paul Newman in The Verdict.
Oh, yes. I was hoping someone would say that soon.
If you haven't seen it, watch it.
The Verdict.
It is. Now, I like The Pelican Brief as well. It's related to law, but The Verdict is law practice.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, you're in for a treat.
Well, so on this show, we will occasionally do deep dives into legal movies. And so we've done My Cousin Vinny, A Few Good Men, and we've done The Lincoln Lawyer, and then Witness for the Prosecution from the 50s we have recorded and is out by the time people are watching this. So The Verdict is on the list.
The Verdict
to do.
is.
I'm excited that you mentioned it.
I think it's the best.
That's great. Well, thank you again.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
You bet.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening.